Hello, today is March 6th, 2025. I'm meeting today with Mr. Larry Bate at the Homelake Veterans Home in Monte Vista, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for Remember and Honor. Thank you, Larry, for sitting down today to tell your story.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
Okay. I was born in 1942 on August 20th, and I was born to a sheep herder family in northern Nevada in a large open valley in a sheep camp. And that was in 1942, of course. And then from there, I think I hit your thing a little bit. I found out later, of course, as I grew a little bit older, we were the furthest post office from a railroad in the United States. We had no running water, no electricity, no TVs, no radios, no newspapers, no nothing. The largest grade school and junior high school I ever went to was 13 kids, and that was all 9 grades. And you had to board out to go to high school 135 miles away. Well, Dad was a sheep herder. He only made $80 a month, plus food, and he was gone a lot of the year, so he trapped during the winter. So I used to run the trap line with him, and I learned about trapping and stuff like that. And it was something that we didn't know about because everybody in the valley was poor.
Yeah.
So, and we were poor along with them, but it seemed as though everybody was very happy.
Oh, it sounds wonderful.
And the funny thing about it, I found out about everything before I was ever 12 years old, which got me in a little trouble later on in life. But we all had horses. I rode about 6 miles to school. We had an old paint horse, and he'll be in one of the pictures I'll show you. And the 5 of us kids used to pile on him, and we'd ride him to school, and I'd just drop the reins, and we'd go to school all day. Then we'd ride him home.
I'll be there.
We were only able to get to our place. Dad got crippled up a little later and quit herding sheep and working cattle, so he built a little country store. Now it's halfway between Burns, Oregon and Winnemucca, Nevada. That's 275 mile stretch, and he figured for the ranchers and everybody concerned to have a place to get gas and some food and stuff. Now everything came in on a stage 2 days a week. So it had to come in on dry ice if it was, able to be spoiled. And otherwise, they came in on a pickup, and the one from Burns stopped at the state line and unloaded, and the one from Winnemucca, Nevada, it came the other way, and with it they would bring mail, any kind of mail. Everything that we bought was by catalog, no other way. And then I got appendicitis when I was 11.
Oh, man.
I'm going to almost 12 years old. So my dad and mom had to rush me to Winnemucca, which was 125 miles, to the closest doctor and hospital. And thank God I made it there. But it's interesting, that's the first time I ever saw a running water, I ever saw a toilet, a telephone, or any type of technology at all. And I couldn't believe it when they rented a room, and I went in and I had to use the bathroom, and I couldn't believe where this water was coming from and what was happening. And anyway, that was my childhood as far as that goes.
Oh, it sounds like a wonderful childhood. How many siblings did you have?
Just a brother, that's all.
Oh, okay.
And he was 2 years older than me. Uh-huh. And he was more of a bookworm type guy. And I had a wonderful grandmother that used to come and bring an iron skillet, potatoes, onions, and garlic. And we would saddle the horses, and we'd ride up the canyon, and she'd make us a bonfire, and we'd play like we were cooking out. And then we'd eat. And my grandmother, all the years that I knew her, smelled like garlic. But anyway, she was wonderful. And as time went by, and Dad couldn't trap anymore, and basically he trapped for bobcat, coyote, mountain lion, beaver, muskrat, stuff like that. So I got to learn that also. But I couldn't wait to get out of this valley where there wasn't any people. And so his brother invited us to go to Reno, Nevada, and live with them, and he could get him a job because my uncle worked for Bill Harrah in Harrah's Club, which was a casino at that time. So we did. And
so you moved to Reno then?
We moved directly from that forsaken place to the pit of the world as it was at that time. Yeah. Reno was bigger than Vegas. And Harold's Club was the light of the world, you know. And my cousin was an artist for the people that owned Harold's Club. So all of the things, if you ever go to Vegas or Virginia City, any of the murals that are left were all done by him. But I went to school there, and it was my first taste of classrooms and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And we only lived...
How old were you when you moved to...
12.
12, okay.
Yeah. And the first thing I did was found out, I think I was just starting the 7th grade, and they didn't think that I'd had an appropriate education from where I came from, so they tested me, and I won first place in spelling, penmanship, and math. And so I thought that was pretty easy. It wasn't very hard for me, because that's what we learned. We learned all the basics when we were young kids, you know. But anyway, from there, then my mother got rheumatic fever, and we started moving around. We went broke in Missouri on a farm in the 7th grade, but in the 7th grade I became president of the local club that they had there, and so that gave me a little taste of that, and I got to know what the Arkansas, Missouri land was like, because that's where we went, and we raised cattle and oats and stuff like that, but Dad wasn't a farmer. You know, he was a sheep guy. Yeah. But anyway, from there, we traveled around some more and went to Lincoln, Nebraska, and that's where I went to high school. And I have gone to my 55th anniversary. I've got to make the 65th. It's coming up. And I was graduated in 59. But I won some contests at this school class reunion we had. I won most times married, youngest and oldest wife, most children, youngest and oldest child, and the twist contest. So I wasn't totally unaware of everything that was happening. But from there, in Lincoln, my mom went kind of one direction. My dad went the other direction for a while. And so I left home. And I was trying to raise this child, and I was trying to go to school and trying to work at the same time. Well, I decided that a friend of mine had a hot dog stand. So I decided, why can't I build one? So I did, and he helped me, and that was my first of 3 restaurants. And I would open at Friday noon, and I would close Sunday night. I made enough money to be able to quit busting dishes at night and being able to get some sleep and do my thing. So from there, I had a grandmother that was in her 90s, and I spent a lot of time with her. And so I went to see her one day, and she wanted me to walk her to the grocery store. This is kind of an ugly time in my life, what happened. I always kind of watched her and everything because she was so old. And she lived catty corner from the Safeway grocery store. And she always walked across the fast street first, the one way, and then the slow street. She never varied from it. But because I was with her that day when we left, I said, Grandma, don't worry. I'll take you the other way, and there's no problem. Well, as fate would have it, a car ran a stop sign and hit us, and it killed my grandma, and it knocked me for a loop also. But anyway, I got a small settlement out of that. I got $1,500. So I had learned to play pool, and I loved pool. So he was willing to sell the pool hall for $2,500. His name was Carl Wise. He was an excellent billiard player and a pool player and a good friend of mine. So I bought the pool hall. And I became a world-class pool player over the next few years, and I owned the pool hall, and I would go on the road locally, and I would try to be a hustler, and I was too young, really. But I did well. I did fine, and I later then sold the pool hall, and wanted to go into other ventures, which we won't get into, but they weren't exactly helpful in my career. Okay, put it that way. And so the girl that I had gotten pregnant and had the children with, I had to get another job after that. I sold the hot dog stand, I think for $300 or something like that. But anyway, I had a part-time job. Well, I got in, after school, I would go to work in a paint store. I fell in love with the paint business. Now that carried me my whole life. I was still in the paint business for 40 years.
What was it about the paint business that you liked?
I don't know, and I liked formulations and I liked figuring things out. And I was excellent with colors. So after school, I'd go to work for Cook Paints and I would match colors. Well, then they put me inside because I was good with talking to people. So I started working behind the counter. Well, of course, then I got divorced. And all of a sudden I went from classified as 3A to 1A.
Oh boy.
And I got a letter in the mail from Uncle Sam that they'd like to see me at the station downtown, the Federal Building, for a... So here I go. I didn't have any idea what the Army was about or nothing. And so I went and took my physical. And I was going to tell them that I had a bad knee, but they didn't want to listen to me. They said, just go over there and get that line. And so, which I did. And I was always a guy who, I love my country. I still do. I love it tremendously. And every entity that is involved. And I'm talking about the governments, I'm talking about the military, talking about everything. I was always active in community stuff, the Kiwanis, the JCs, the Rotisserie, the Lions Club, everything I could join because I wanted to give. I'm a Christian man and I believe in giving more than taking, and so I tried to apply as such. But anyway, I got involved in that, and I took my basic in Fort Bliss, Texas, and that was, I got involved in the missiles and the missile artillery missile school.
How was that transition going from civilian life into military life?
It was probably easier on me than it was on anybody else in my bus because this was an adventure for me.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And I was kind of interested in Texas anyway because my dad, in his young life, and we won't get into that, but he hoboed all the way from Del Rio, Texas, and one of my heroes was Wolfman Jack, who him and Don Imus were the guys that took the payola, and so I couldn't wait to listen to his radio show. But anyway, I didn't have any trouble in Fort Bliss. I maxed everything that I needed to do, and I kind of stayed under the radar a little bit, you know. But I went from there to Fort Ord, California, where I would tell you before I moved to Fort Ord, what happened to me was I got into an argument with a kid on my first pass in basic training, and I got into a fight, and I lost my deal to go across to Mexico for the first time away from the base, and so I became the first sergeant's orderly. Okay, well, the first sergeant kind of took a liking to me, and he was a good guy to me. Well, his brother was the colonel that gave the OCS tests, and somehow he got a hold of his brother and said, I've got a young man here that's pretty sharp, and he seems to be good in the things that I put him in charge of, and I'd like to have you take the test. And I scored real high on it. And the rest is history. He pursued it, and I got taken into OCS.
Where'd you do your OS? Where'd you do your officer training at?
Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
Artillery.
Okay.
But first I went to Fort Ord, California and did the OCS prep and the AIT as they call it. And then I left from there and I went right straight to midnight, ugly, dark, raining in Lawton, Oklahoma, carrying my duffel bags and stuff. And when I dropped my duffel bags, and that's when it started, because the man behind the desk was an upperclassman, and he was just waiting for somebody to come in, and he got me. I was a smoker, number one. So when I reported in to him, and I had shined everything as best it could be shined, and the first thing he did was reach over and get my brass off and jerked it right off my uniform. And he said, go upstairs and smoke your last cigarette for 6 months. I thought I'd been hit with a lightning bolt. And he said, by the way, take that belt off. Because I had that thing, just, you could polish it, you know. I said, what did I get myself into? Well, make a long story short, I signed in, did everything, and he worked me over pretty good. But I took it okay. So he said, go get your stuff, and he said, you'll be in, I think it was C Battery, 3rd building down on the right, and he said, go ahead and check in down there. And so I said to him, I said, sir, we had to start right then. I said, sir, is there a Jeep outside or something? No. You walk down there, and when you get tired of walking, you crawl. And it happened to me because it started raining so hard. And I'm dragging this duffel bag and this other bag. And by the time I got to the house, there was, I think, 70 of us total from all over the country that I looked, and I had wore out my sleeves in my uniform, and I was bleeding a little bit. And they thought it was funny because there was about probably 8 or 9 upperclassmen waiting for us. And that's when it started. It was about 70 hours of it. And that's when they could do a lot of stuff that they can't do today, and they embellished doing all of it, okay? I had no problem with OCS. You know, we reveilled, I think it was 4:15, and we ran 2 miles, then we got 15 minutes to eat. We had to sit on the front of our chair, the first 4 inches. We had to put our hands in our lap. We had to ask the table commandant if we could please pass some meat, take a bite, put it in your mouth, put your hands back, chew it, swallow it. We went through this all through lower class, and I had no problem with it. The only thing I had a little problem with was when we had the SS&S, and you know what that is, and there was 50 of us in this shower, everybody trying to do their duty and trying to shave, and you had your toothpaste here and your shaver here and your towel around here, and you know, you're trying to do your thing and then be back in formation, and you know, in X amount of time. And so it was, but I slept on top of my bunk. I had the corners 45, I measured them, and I snapped them, and that's when and I had a little pin that they didn't know about that I stuck to the corners, and they never moved. And I had a deal where I had a rope, little linen rope, and I had a problem with that foot. I had a foot that bothered me when time I was little, so I used to tie it up to the top rail on my bunk, so my heart wouldn't beat in it, you know. Then I'd take it off in the morning. Reveille, out, do our classes, do it. What we did is I then inherited, as soon as I turned middle class, I inherited a young man, and that's called your little brother, and you help him get through the deal. And that carried all the way through. He later became a full colonel. I think he got killed in the war, I'm not sure, but he made full colonel. His name was, the nickname was Downtown Charlie Brown because his name was Charlie Brown. And our post commander was Charlie Brown, 3-star general, I think it was. But anyway, from that point, I went through the whole thing, and they gave orders, and I had no problem with it. I graduated high in leadership and academics too. I had no problem with it at all, but we were getting orders, everybody was getting it from Vietnam, and mine got rescinded and pulled back, And so I asked, it was Colonel Camp, and I asked him what the deal was, and he said, we want to use you because, he said, there's been some comment that you're pretty good in leadership. So they pulled me back and made me a teacher in the OCS brigade. And so for a year or two, I taught gunnery, tactics, small weapons, leadership, everything that there was that they wanted to throw at me, I did. And at one time, they told me that I had the highest OERs written about me as any junior officer except the big school, you know.
West Point?
Yeah, West Point. And so they kept me there, and they used me in different spots. Well, from there, I got into the different stuff as far as repelling and the Slide for Life and that stuff. But then they started the program Prisoner of War and Escape and Evasion, and they put me in charge of that. And it was quite a change for me. But it was really the basic part of I didn't get into. I did head some units as battery commander when I was at Fort Sill, and we used to shoot at the, periodic. I'd take the companies to the field, and then I taught the other junior officers also. Well, I got a call one day from the Attorney General's office here at Colorado. I was getting ready I had made first lieutenant, and I was getting ready to ETS, and they asked me if I would come to them and talk to them about the National Guard because they had no artillery officers. And I said, sure. So Felix Sparks was the commander here at that time, and quite a war hero of mine because I think he was the second most decorated man in World War II, next to Murphy. But anyway, he was kind of an idol. I mean, I looked up to him. And so they put me there as an XO, and so I commanded those units because at that time they didn't have a battery commander, and that's where I became a captain, became battery commander. And so I commanded that unit for 4 years.
This is the Colorado National Guard?
Yes,
okay.
And I toured the state, and I would do inspections, etc., and I would teach people map reading and all that. And I got a call one day from the AG, and it was, they have moved me, they have transferred me to Camp George West in Denver, Colorado, to federally activate a brand new unit, and they're going to give me my first sergeant and my motor sergeant, and I have to recruit the rest. And I said, holy crap, how did I get into this? I'm going to jump off here for a second. That's a small thing that happened. This year here, we had a general fly in on the Blackhawks. Well, there was three of them came in, and it was a lady general. I didn't know who she was. But anyway, all of us that were in these or wheelchairs were sitting around the statue there, and she was going around with the brigadier general. They were meeting people and talking to people. Well, when she came in front of me, I looked like that at her, and she introduced herself and stuff, and I said, you're wearing a Colorado National Guard patch. What's the deal? And she said, well, I'm stationed at Camp George West. And I said, do you remember, who started that, by the way? And she said, I don't know. And I said, well, you just shook my hand. I'm the one that started it. And she said, what a small world. So we talked for a few minutes, and she had to go on and do on her own way. But I thought then, what a small world it is. The same as when I came into this place the very first day that Pam brought me around. I came and I was introducing myself, which they weren't used to, but I did it to the whole cafeteria, and I came in front of this guy, and he said, I already know you, Larry. I said, how do you know me? He said, I listen to your radio show every every Saturday morning. And he says, I've listened to you for years. And that is the guy you interviewed yesterday, Tom Jones.
Oh.
And it was kind of, and that just, that's an ironic thing, but I mean, it was funny. And from then on, it's been wonderful here. And the only real down part of my life was at Camp George West. We got started, and I think we had like 10 or 12 people. We had a motor sergeant in. We hit the highway patrol real heavy, trying to get some of those people, you know, because they were stationed there too. And I went through a divorce, and so I called the people at the guard, and I told them I was going to bow out. And at that time, I'd had 11 total years, and it kind of was a mistake in a way. I regretted it a year or two later. But anyway, I went on.
So were you on loan from the Army to the National Guard, or what was your status really?
Well, as far as the National Guard, now what I did there was I took the units to Fort Carson and to over to, I don't know what the name of that one is over by Grand Junction, but that one to Guernsey, Wyoming, and we shot. Every year we would shoot, and that's when we did the transition from the 155s to the 8-inch, and so it was a big transition for us, you know. But I don't know how they got contacted or how the AG here got contacted, but I would guess it was probably a fellow by the name of General Marlin Camp. Now, Marlin Camp, I think, was General Depew's son-in-law, if I remember rightly. It's a long time ago. And he, I think, put him in touch and said, this guy will probably be good for you to go to these units because they don't know, an 8-inch from a bucket of bolts. Right, yeah. And so that's how it started there. And from there, and I lost my wife. I got remarried. I lost my wife, and that was, and then to transfer forward, I sold my places in Florida. But before I did that, in conjunction with living in Florida, I built a paint factory in Denver, Colorado.
Well, I think you're getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
You're getting post-military.
Right.
Let's get back to your story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of the National Guard, I was really infatuated with it because these are just regular people right off of the farm, and they probably functioned as my unit, probably better than any unit that I commanded at Fort Sill.
Wow.
They were phenomenal. We outshot Carson every time we went against them. We went against our own bat. We had another battery here, and they were out of Colburn, Colorado, and he was a guide, and he and I became good friends, and we had a great competition all the time I was in the Guard, and that made it fun for me also. But I got remarried in the Guard, and that's when I eventually, happened, and my wife died, and of course I moved out. But I kind of came back to here, and I checked out some places in Denver, different to try and give out my retired life.
Yeah.
Because the thing with the military had changed drastically since they found me able to have compensation. I was able to afford this place. And so that made it possible. And my ex-wife, who lives here, and my daughters and grandkids and stuff, she said, Larry, you need to come and go through. And here I had lived here for 12 years and didn't know about this place. And I told Pam, I said, you need to get the word out better than it's been, Yeah. And so I think it's been a real uplift as far as myself and the things that I'm able to get active and stuff again. I got friends around me, and I've already bought a plot, brought my little dog with me. He was here with me till he passed away. He was 17, and so I actively got involved with the VFW, American Legion, and all the different spots. And the people have been kind to me. They've got me involved in some stuff, and I'm a pretty happy camper.
Well, I'm going to reel you back again and go back to your story. You were teaching at Fort Sill,
Right.
and then came out to Colorado, or was National Guard after your Army career, or was that?
Yeah, no, the National Guard came after my Army career.
Okay, so let's get back to Fort Sill and take your story from there then.
Okay, in Fort Sill, I got active in the things that they wanted me to do.
Yeah.
And which I did. If it was to take a unit to the field and shoot them, or stay a week for a bivouac or whatever, I would do that. So I kind of bounced around, but I taught everything that was in the academy. And then later when they came to me, and that was, there was a period of time when that was my only association with Vietnam. And that's a part I don't really want to talk about.
Okay, fair enough, yeah.
But anyway, when I came back and I taught, until the Guard, till I ETS, I taught weapons on this new thing that they were going to document. I don't know if they still do it or not. But I stayed there with and my wife was a nurse there at that time. And so she wanted to get out. And I said, that's fine. But I said, I've had this contact with the National Guard, so we'll go back home and we'll go from there. And that's how I got set up my ETS, the Army, and right into the National Guard.
Yeah. Well, earlier you talked to be off camera. You talked about teaching prisoner of war tactics. And
yes.
So
okay.
Catch all. We got to catch all of this here.
We put everybody through it. It was a deal. It's a 2-week deal, and you're captured just like you would be captured as a unit. I mean, you're given a class ahead of time, and you're being told exactly what's going to happen. Well, they kind of poo-pooed it. They just thought it was going to be a walk-through deal. Well, it wasn't. Okay, we actually captured them with the helicopters, with everything, and we took them as a group to a prisoner of war camp. And it had the totem poles, it had the spinning barrels, it had the interrogation, deep interrogation, where they staked you down, bent you back. And I had a couple guys there that were prior service that had, one of them was named Camacho, I can't remember the other one, but they worked for me as far as interrogation, and it was done in tents. And if in fact they got through, now we put the Air Force, we put the West Point people, we put everybody through this. It wasn't.
So Navy flyers, everybody?
Everybody. I don't know of anybody that we didn't put through it. And then we put through several of the recruit groups out of California, and which was the most fun because there was a lot of LA football players from the Rams, and they thought they were going to walk through it, and they had some of them crying when they left. But it was a brutal thing, and it was tough. And I had an unfortunate thing happen there, in that when you got done, if you made it through, we shot over the top of them, and they had the low crawl under the wire and all that stuff. But if you made it to the evasion port, you were put out at night with no shoes. And you had to go about 4 miles, 5 miles through the rocks and cactus, whatever was there, to a station point. And there was a lot of rim rocks and stuff. And they had to negotiate there to reform, and then we would have a classroom the next day, and we'd go through everything that they did. We had a lot of people drop out because we had like a 20-mile forced march at the end after everything with a full packing gear. And I had an ambulance that followed me, and in case the people dropped out, and a lot of the people did. And I mean, they didn't get kicked out or anything, but
Yeah.
they went back to be taken care of. It was a tough class. It was the toughest class that they ever got through in OCS. And our sergeants made it tough on them. And, oh God, we had a young guy, he had a temper problem, and we knew that, but it was not a problem. But when he got to the final stage of it, I had a sergeant there, and he got kind of smart, and he pushed the sergeant. The sergeant pushed him back, and he fell and broke his spleen. Unfortunately for me, I was the commander in charge. Unfortunately for me, they decided to do something to all of us. And I got a short federal investigation, and of all people, it was Ted Kennedy and his entourage.
Oh, geez. Huh.
And they showed up. My colonel, he was my defense and my sergeant's defense, and it didn't last long. It got poo-pooed and sent away, and I went on with my career. But I was afraid for a while.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But those things happen to you, and it just, I guess.
What was some of the feedback? You know, once the Vietnam War ended and our POWs were released, did they ever comment on how that training helped them?
Yeah, you know, I talked to some people. Boy, it's been 50-some years ago, you know, but yeah, we didn't have any access to the water at that point, so I couldn't do the squirrel cage, which was very common. We also did some of the stuff. I read a book, and I was one of the classes I taught was about General Dean, and he was a general in the Korean War that got captured. And he's the one that came up with the adage, never tell them what they want to know, because the goose will never lay the golden egg. Meaning, they'll never know. Don't say anything that name, rank, serial number, date of birth. That's all you need, because they'll never kill you if they think they're going to get something out of you.
Ah, okay.
But when he got released, he was devastated, broken wrist, broken arm, broken shoulder, knees. I mean, he wrote a book. I used to have it. I don't have it now. But, you know, I used a lot of that when I gave classes and stuff, because there was a lot of people that did talk. But recently, on the front of the Vietnam Veterans of America was a guy, I can't remember his name, Hickok or something. He did the tapping, okay, and they ended up giving the names of 250 people.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that, you know, I mean, they're amazing to me. But having taught that part of my life, I could see how it would happen. There were people, because when you're in there, you know, I mean, these guys couldn't wait to get out after 5 days, you know, much less just somebody that's there forever.
Yeah, right.
You know, but it was the greatest thing of my life was that time period of my life from the OCS, which, by the way, I would never do again, but I'd never take $1 million for it either. That type of a deal.
Right, yeah.
And that part of my life has stayed with me forever and has carried through clear to here.
Huh.
We have a wonderful staff here. We're doing, I think, great things.
Yeah,
I count myself, I'm 83 years old, I count myself as, a lot of it is due to the fact the training I had.
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So now did you plan, you know, obviously you were, when you went in, at what point did you plan to decide to make it a career? Or? When
he interviewed me to go to OCS, I thought, wow, you know that, and I'll be honest with you, my first sergeant said, now let me tell you, you can get your choice of the combat arms, you can get your choice sometimes or where you're going to go, if you're going to go to Benning or Dix or wherever. And he said, I suggest Fort Sill. And he helped me kind of guide me through it. And he said, I'll tell you something. It's a whole lot better going through this whole 4-year period as an officer than it is as a ground pounder. And that's what he told me. And I learned from that, and I adhered to it. And so it was probably the best advice that was ever given to me, because it kept me out of combat in a way,
Yeah.
but yet it kept me real close to the Army and the guns and stuff like that. I feel, boy, we got a guy here that was involved in an artillery unit that had 2 175s and 2 8-inchers. And of course, the Army got smart and they sold 175s to the Marines and kept the ones that would shoot more accurate. But now I find out there's no more 8-inch SPs in the Army.
Wow.
I think we sold them to Europe.
So did you spend your whole career then at Fort Sill, or?
Well, yeah, I did with TDY to different places,
Yeah,
but
okay.
yeah, my pretty much my career was surrounded around there until, of course, I got to the Guard.
Yeah, right.
And then I traveled quite a bit and stuff. But
Right, yeah.
I never asked for it. I just got assigned, and I'd wake up and it was a whole new adventure for me.
Huh.
So
Wow.
that's and life has been an adventure for me. So
Yeah, so we'll take it from there. So how many years then in the Army? You put
I had 4 years in the Army and 7 years in the National Guard.
Okay, all right. And I guess we'll take your story then. Once you got out of the Guard, I guess the first question is, after those 11 years, how was that transition going now from military life into civilian life?
Well, it was okay, because when I got drafted, I was kind of already started in my career as paint.
Yeah, okay.
And I got drafted right out of that. Well, the owner of that company was kind of like my second father. And he said, it'll be just like this when you get back. So I came right back to everything, and from there I started the rest of my life.
Okay.
And the only thing I added to it was the National Guard.
Yeah.
And I stayed active there. But it went right on, and it went right on for me. But building a paint factory from scratch it was 110,000 square feet, and it was we did about 3,000 to 4,000 gallons a day right out of the blocks. But I recruited a chemist, an assistant chemist, everything that I needed, and I built this factory.
Why did you decide to build a factory? Prior to that, it was pretty much you were doing pretty much retail, or weren't you? Or
No, it was wholesale and retail.
Oh, okay.
But the flood came in '65.
right.
And really put us in the wholesale business, big time. And so he put me in charge of all the stores. Then I became a store manager. Then they put me in charge of all the salesmen. So then I became in charge of all the salesmen. Then they made me a vice president and so on. And I went up the ladder, and he became still like a father to me. And I got entrenched deep in the paint business, in formulation, distribution. I did all the financials. I did everything.
Wow.
So, and I got 4 backers, and we bought a building for $1.5 million. It was a building that had been vacated by Kelly Moore Paint Factory about 5 years before that. I knew that, and so we bought the factory, and and I also recruited 2 of their old people. And one of them was a plant manager, and one of them was a chemist. And so from there, the rest is history. And we ended up building the factory and 5 stores. And I had it for about 5 years, and then sold it. I had 4 partners in it. They had all contacted cancer. So they became inactive, and it was all laying pretty much on me. So they went to me and said, see if we can sell it. So I did. I went on and contacted the big companies, and lo and behold, somebody was interested, and they bought it from us. And then the rest is I kind of retired after that, went to Nevada, bought a casino. Don't ask me why, but I went into the casino business. And had that for 2 or 3 years and sold out to the gentleman who owns Avon Cosmetics, I believe it was. He had one in Henderson and he had one in Laughlin, and he wanted to put one in Elko. And I happened to have one that was ready-made for him. So one of my friends came to me that was in the real estate business. He said, Larry, are you willing to sell your... And I said, my wife would love that. And he said, I have somebody that might be interested. Can I arrange a dinner? I said, sure. So this guy brings his jet in, takes me to dinner. We have a nice dinner. Just before we terminated it, he said, he pushed me a napkin and he said, give me a number. I was halfway ready for it, not totally ready, but the real estate guy that I had, he knew about buying and selling some. So he told me what he thought it was worth, and he told me what he thought this guy would probably pay.
Oh, okay.
So that helped me. And so I did. I shoved a number over, and it was a pretty large number. I'd never seen one in 7 figures, you know.
Yeah.
So I shoved it over, and he never looked at it. He just put it in his pocket. So I thanked him for the dinner. He thanked me, and he left, went back to the hotel, and I left and went home. 2 weeks later, this real estate guy called me and said, we need to see you down at the lawyer's office. And I said, okay. So I had bought a paint store too, by the way, and put my brother in business. Okay, so that was in Elko also. So I went down there, and there was a check. And he handed it to me, and I said, you're not serious. He said, I'm serious. And he said, but he's got a lot of questions. He wants you and your wife and 3 children to go to Maui for 2 weeks and stay in his hotel in Maui, all expenses paid, while he dissects everything. He said, now he wants to know if you want to sell your home. And I said to my wife, I said, she said, right now, you know, 'cause she hated Elko. Because a 24-hour life is tough. So he made me an offer on the house, and it was wonderful. So that, with all my furniture and everything, we took our stuff we wanted to keep. So that went along, and we were about a week into that vacation when I got a phone call that said he would like to move the closure date up about 10 days if you're willing. And I said, sure. I said, we'll have to come back. He said, but here's what'll happen. All of your stuff will be in 2 U-Haul trucks. They'll be locked and bonded by his employees. And he wants to go over, he wants to buy your receivables that are still out. So we got together, we did the receivables. I sold him those, and the real estate guy and him, when we had the closing, he said, now have you got driver's license? Because all you 2 need to do is drive out of town. And that was,
wow.
The rest of it is history. I went to Florida, bought some houses, was with my wife down there for several years. She got liver cancer, and she was on death bed 7, 8, 10 times. I stayed with her through the whole 6 years, and then when she passed away, I packed, I couldn't stay there, so I gave one house to my daughter, one to my son. I sold the other one, and I moved to the San Luis Valley. And that's how I'm here.
Here,
Yeah.
Wow.
And
So that story, this fascinating story, brings us up to the present day here at Homelake. Okay, yeah, and from the sounds of it, you're not really retired. You're in the thick of a whole bunch of different things.
I am, and it's been at the request of the rest of the people, because my kids, I've got a daughter and a son that I'm still real close to, and I've got a grandson that just got Butler University. It's just giving him a full ride. He was a top defensive football player in high school in Indiana.
Oh, okay.
So they gave him a deal. So I kind of try to keep as much time as I can for them, because I have
Yeah.
30 35 grandkids.
Well, you were saying you've had 6 wives,
Yes,
12 children,
yes.
35 grandchildren,
That's right.
and 32 great-grandchildren.
that I know of. But it's a blessing in
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
And I've been blessed.
Yeah.
The Lord's blessed me, and so I like giving
Yeah,
much more than getting, and I love to.
Yeah.
Anything I can do here. I don't want to change anything here. I just want to help make it better.
yeah, right.
We're going, myself and another guy, Vietnam vet. He really got shot up bad. But anyway, we're in charge of the garden this year.
Oh.
And now, are you the gardener?
No, I don't live here. Yeah.
Okay, but somebody was touring it yesterday, and he was a gardener. I don't know what he's doing. Oh, he's the guy that's doing the funeral. I'm sorry, but yeah, we're going to do it because I'm a gardener freak.
Oh,
I
good.
I love growing stuff,
Yeah.
and that's a great hobby of mine. So I plan on staying here the rest of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
And my children all know that. And I've changed everything from Nevada, northern Nevada, 140 miles to the closest town,
Yeah,
out in the
amazing.
middle of the desert.
Yeah.
That's where my parents, my grandparents are buried.
Wow.
And the cemetery is 20 feet by 20 feet. And they're all in one spot there.
Well, now, will you be interned here, or will you be taken to Nevada?
No, I'm going to be right here.
Okay.
And the reason for that is I have children scattered all over the Middle West.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be fair to them to go 2,000 miles
Yeah, okay.
to a place. If you have a minute too, when you're done or whatever, I want you to come by my cubicle, and I've got some real interesting pictures that on my wall.
Okay, all right.
I have no more space on my walls.
We'll do that.
So you'll
Yeah.
get a.
Yeah, we'll finish up here and we'll go do that. But,
Anyway, I still have a casino that's still active and a restaurant that's still very active in Denver.
you got
So I visited
some
once in a
legacy out there for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, as we wind down this interview, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about, or any other stories that have floated to the top since we've been sitting here that you remembered you want to tell, so that ideally we round out your story as best we can? Is there, or do you feel like we covered everything to your
I
satisfaction?
omitted around it. I will tell you the story of how I ended up so injured.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
There was, I think there was 9 Vietnamese generals that had visited Fort Bliss, and they were interested in seeing somebody rappel. So they came to me and asked me if I would do a hip seat and a commando, and I said sure. Well, whoever had tied me off on the commando rappel, I did the hip seat first, and everything went, and everybody's happy and they're cheering.
Now, what is that exactly? Explain what that is.
Okay, hip seat is when you have a safety rope, and you'll see in movies and stuff where they've got 3 ropes. Okay, one of those is a safety rope that you can jerk, and it takes you right back into the cliff.
Oh.
Okay, you can't slide anymore. A commando rappel has none. So you're on your own. On any given rappel that I did, I had the leather, 3 pieces of 3/16 leather sewed into my glove because it burned up on the way down. Because you get up about 27 miles an hour when you're going down, and you're hitting the cliff going out, coming back, hitting the cliff going out, and you have to synchronize when you leave to let loose of the rope. Otherwise, you end up upside down, and that's what you don't want to do. So when I got to the bottom, whoever it was, don't know who it was, that had tied me off, he tied me off 10 feet short.
Oh no.
And I ran out of rope, and of course I just threw out my arms and I hit. That's what created the injuries in all of and that was my doctors through my life. They asked me when that happened. I said 1969. And they said, well, that's the remnants of it. You can see right here.
But initially, you kept it. You handled it yourself.
I kept it. I never told anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't want to screw up my promotions and stuff, which is really stupid. But I didn't want to be a burden to the Army either. I had been given, I don't want to say special privilege, but they had looked at my career really hard and had wanted to use me in places that they weren't using other people. And I was fine with that. But it wasn't until these women who did these reviews of stuff, called me and told me they were doing a review on me. And then a year and a half later, they called me to say, Larry, you're going to have some compensation due you. And I said, I don't need any. I said, I'm getting by myself, but but it was tough, and the only thing I had done somewhat smart was, as I got older and with closer to the man who owned the paint companies, he wanted me, he knew I was a Christian, but he wanted me to go become a Jew. And I was at his deathbed. And I told him, I said, Jack, we're only one person apart. Don't worry about it. I'll see you there. And he died immediately, the next day, I think. But anyway, he taught me some stuff about business that I would have never known. I was a wild man. I mean, if somebody'd say, hey, I want to start a company, I was ready. A guy in Denver. I got to meet several people. I don't know if you know who Philip Anschutz is. Okay? He was a friend of Jack's, so I got to meet him, got to talk to him. I was friends with every mayor that was through the line, and Paul Swam, and I could go on and on. Governor Glenn, the Republican, because he made sure of that. But we had Nuggets and Bronco tickets together, so I got to go and meet all these people. They all had little tidbits of stuff
that you mined and learned.
Yes, and I plugged it all in. So when I built my paint factory, they told me that I couldn't do it. But I already had, and I'll use Donald Trump as an example. He was thinking about this group of people. The young lady, that's his press conference, wonderful young lady, and smart. Wow. She said he was thinking about these people and dissecting them months because he knew he was going to win, because he thought that God put his hand on him and suffered through that assassination attempt. And he said it again night before last. And I have been a great admirer of his for probably 50 years, because he had an interview when I was just a young man, and he was being interviewed by a person who was really astute in business. And he said, Mr. Trump, why do you maintain on staying in Manhattan and building these high rises when your dad told you not to? And he said, well, Dad didn't realize that the air above was ours too. And secondly, they can't make no more dirt. That's why I stay in real estate. And I've never forgotten that. You can't make no more dirt. Unless we get to Mars, something. And I'm a great admirer of Musk, because I became pretty wealthy several times in my life. And I can say it was never my goal. Never. It was a byproduct of what I was doing. And I can remember my kids, they were just going crazy, because all of a sudden we'd be living in a house and floor that had pools and hot tubs, and we were on a country club, and we had boats, and we had a canal, and we had all this stuff. And the next thing you know, I'm having a yard sale, that kind of a deal. And so I learned a little bit from each one of those guys. And by the way, I pulled a trick on all the nurses. I had 8 operations in a row over a 3-year period, and I'm supposed to have 2 more. And this one here was a terrible operation, but it wasn't a replacement. This one was a total replacement. Now they want to replace this, because the part I didn't tell you was when I was in therapy, I fell and broke my femur from my kneecap to my hip bone. It's a 2.5-foot scar. When this doctor saw it, he said, I've never seen one. Well, it broke vertical. So that's why I'm in a chair. I tried therapy 2 or 3 times, and it didn't work. The pain was too much that I just, so, and now I'm telling my family and my doctor, I don't want to be operated on again. I'm 83 and I'm fine. I'm happy. I can go anywhere I want to go here. I've got another one that I can put in a car and I can go to restaurants. My kids come and get me. And, I just really am not ready for another operation.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. One thing you did leave out in this conversation is you had a radio show.
Oh my goodness, yes. And that happened after my ETS from the Army. Okay, they had Qual Howell's paint company had made a deal with KOA Radio, and they wanted to do a Saturday morning fix-up, paint-up show.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so they got a hold of Guff Merkins, a bunch of the other people from KOA, and they said, we'd like to have some people come down and read some stuff for us. I did it here too, by the way. I don't know if they're going to use it or not, but anyway, so we did. There was like 4 or 5 of us, and so they chose me, and they said, you've got a natural radio voice, and they test you on because in radio, when some guy has bought 30 seconds, that's what he's bought. So when it's time to break and go to that, you have to be smart enough to do a transition. Hey, speaking of Paul,
yeah.
We got to talk about DAP here.
Okay.
It's number 1 call, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Well, the transitions were easy for me because I had done them in the Army too. And so they did that. And then KOA, after Qual's contract was up, I did that for like 5 years. Then after that, KOA came to me and said, we want to do a show and we're going to sponsor it and we want you to do it.
Wow.
And that was KOA Paint Up Fix Up. And then I did some guest shows. I did one with Don Imus. I did one with my favorite of all time that he died here. Rush with the Golden Mic. I've never been so real impressed with a guy, but him and Don Imus with a microphone, nobody liked him. Everything was smooth and transition. And then when Don had the MSNBC, TV show, it was wonderful too. He, by the way, is dead now, and he built a ranch in Texas, north of Houston, and so I got to know all those people, and I had several offers. By the way, after I retired from the paint business, to run paint factories, one in North Carolina, one in Georgia, and that's when I thought that I wanted to just retire. Well, of course, then I got bogged down in all kinds of stuff, and the rest is kind of history. But I've had a wonderful life.
Oh, interesting life today.
And I'm proud to say that my afterlife, I am totally okay with all of that. I got that all squared away, and I mean, I don't know if you watch Mark Wahlberg, but I like Mark. He's a good man, the actor, Mark Wahlberg. He's a great statesman. My favorite charity is T2T.
Oh, okay, yes.
That's the most wonderful charity I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
What he's doing for those people.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't say this, I don't want you to write it down, but I donate to some 16 different charities.
Wow.
And they're all pretty much, except for St. Jude and a couple of the Indian schools that I give to, it's almost all military that I give to. Wow. And I'm proud to do it, Yeah. So.
Oh, good for you.
And I'm not going to get married again.
Okay. Well, the last question I always like to ask with these interviews, Larry, is as you look back on your time in the military, do you look at that as just one of the many chapters in your life, or did it play a role in your life, affect your life, change your life? How would you answer that, do you think?
I probably wouldn't change a thing.
I mean, but when you look at that, do you see it as just purely one of the many chapters in your life, or did it play an important role?
No, it all was part of a long series.
Yeah, okay.
You know, it's like Yellowstone. I mean, you could go on forever, really, and that's kind of the way that mine is. I will only say this, that in my older years, since I hit, say, 75, my memory, not my long-term memory, but my short-term memory has failed me quite a bit.
Yeah, okay.
And I can't remember names and dates like I'd like to.
Right.
I'd like to remember now the pictures that I'm going to have them, send to you. Those pictures were 1969. Okay, I'm pretty sure. And I'll look at that and I'll date them for you. Because that's the time period that shows me repelling.
Yeah.
So it's that time period anyway. And how do I count it as important in my life? Wonderful.
Okay.
It's right at the top.
Okay.
And again, I pray for my country. I worry about it. I'm glad we're into this chapter of it. I don't know your likings, but I think that this is going to come back, and it's going to come back strong. And this guy is, I believe, the only guy that I know of that could do it. You know, listen, the people he picked, Pam Bondi, I lived in the state with her she is just the best. Cash Patel, toughest guy. The thing about him is he knows everybody that's did all that stuff to him, and all the different stuff. We're off camera, are we?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's so important to me because I see these things happening, and I'm going, my God, does this guy ever sleep? And how does he ever sleep? I mean, and the people. But J.D. Vance, I read a little about him before he chose him. Boy, am I glad. This guy's tougher than nails, and so's Marco Rubio. Of course, I'm very familiar with him and voted for him and everything. And he has just turned out to be a blessing. Don't be surprised if the Panama Canal, the Gulf of America, and Greenland, and Canada might be the next state. Don't be surprised at anything this guy does. His vision for the future, I've never seen anybody like it. You know, the only guy I compare is Galileo, and he got thrown in prison for it. But he was so far ahead of everybody else in expanding the horizons of the heavens and the telescope and all that stuff, that the church thought it was, they put him in prison. And they tried to do the same thing to this guy. They even tried to kill him. And I get excited, and then I think, wait a minute, what the hell am I going to do? Because I was active in politics all my life. Because the owner of that paint company, Jack, that I was close to, he made sure that when he went to talk to the governor, that I got to sit in a chair in the office. And the head of newspapers, the head of May-DNF, the head of... he's solely responsible for the Chatfield Dam and the Dam the Platte. I worked through the dam when the flood of '65. We were this deep in sewer water and everything. There was beavers and muskrats and fish. Shit floating through our factory, all of our paint. Oh, it was horrible.
I interviewed a veteran that had a printing company down there as well that got flooded out.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh God, it was terrible. My kind of a note of kind of funny stuff is I was single at that particular time, and I worked so hard for him. I know it's called respect, but anyway, I slept in a drop cloth room. I didn't want to miss anything, but I also wanted to do a little dancing at night, so I had to close out the money, and then I had to go to the Club of Go-Go, which was right down the street, and do my stuff I shouldn't have been doing. But you know, the thing that's funny about it is that when everything broke loose, when we got the new lease on the property out there, and built that factory, I was a huge part of it. And God bless him, because I stayed close to him all those times. And you know, we don't learn by talking, even though I talk all the time, but we learn by listening. I also got to learn to listen. And in Proverbs it tells you beginning of wisdom, and that's true, but it's okay to talk too. And it carried me through. There was a lot of people that wanted me to stay with the radio, and I didn't want to stay with the radio because they had changed ownership, and Tom Tancredo was part of that, and Paul McGovern, they were friends of mine. Some stayed, some left, but the only thing that I would have taken would have been a job as a guy that went and checked the restaurants out every year, every day, and give a report to the restaurants, because I love to eat and I love the restaurant business. But anyway, I appreciate it. I hope it helps you.
Well, Larry, I want to thank you for sitting down and telling your story
no
today, but just as important, I want to thank you for your service to our country and quite frankly, to the sacrifice you've made to our country.
Not a problem.
Thank you very much.
You bet. It's my pleasure.
Six years old, and my first time I ever saw a football. My family on a picnic in the Southern Ute Reservation in northern Nevada, where we lived, and our vehicle was a 35 Chevy truck. My grandfather, my grandmother, and that was a haying crew that toured the valley doing haying. Our first horse, we used to ride him to school 6 miles away, and they used to carry 4 and 5 of us on the way. Our very first house that ever had a floor in it or a window in it.
And that's your mom on the bike?
And my mother on the bicycle. Second lieutenant in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, with my aunt. My dress blues in Fort Sill, Oklahoma also. My wife and mother pinning on my bars after graduation from OCS. The pinning on of my silver bar from graduation after OCS, and then my acceleration to first lieutenant. Partner and I in our game room at an entry to our paint factory that I built in Denver, Colorado. That's our sod house, the very first house where I was born, and my father at 60 years later outside of it, still standing. Military friend who lost both legs in Vietnam, carving his very first piece of work as a gift to me.